And joining us now, Jeff Melanson. He's Executive Director at the National Ballet School and Special Advisor on the Arts to the City of Toronto. It's nice to meet you and good to have you here in the studio.
Thanks for having me in.
Why'd you take the job?
Well, I'm an arts worker, love the arts, love Toronto, and I thought this was a great opportunity to work with a new administration in terms of ensuring that the arts are playing a significant role in our city going forward.
Knowing how, you'll forgive me for saying it, unpopular Mayor Ford is in, I guess, with many of the people who frequent the arts scene, how much flack have you encountered since you accepted the position?
You know, I don't think I've received that much flack. I think a lot of folks realize that this is a mayor that is, mayor of our city for the next 4 years, and we do have to find a way to work meaningfully with him and the administration. So certainly there was uncertainty when he was elected because there wasn't an arts platform attached to his particular campaign, and I think people are now seeing that there's an opportunity for artists in the arts community to play a role in crafting that strategy. Fair
to say not too many votes for Rob Ford in the arts community?
I don't know if that is fair because it depends on how you define the community itself. You know, it's a very broad, very large community ranging from commercial interests to not-for-profits. We all have board of directors as well that tend to come from the private sector and bring lots of financial resource. It's very critical to us. So, I think that certainly the arts debates, the mayor's arts debates, were not sort of the most effective interface between the mayor and the community. But partially it's my job to hopefully mend that fence and create better opportunities for us to have that discussion.
Okay, let's play some tape here. You're a ballet guy. You surprised shoppers at the Eaton Center one day, or at least some of your students did, with this. Roll tape, please, Michael. Was this one of those just, obviously planned, but seemingly impromptu moments at the mall one day?
Yes, well, it's a flash mob. I'm glad to see that particular clip because I'm actually a little bit later in that video. You didn't catch that, so thank you for that.
Were you dancing?
I was dancing.
Yikes.
Yeah, and the range of age of participants was from 7 to 82 of that in that work, 350 people. What was actually really curious about it, though, is we developed some online instructional video attached to that, and one of the participants brought that back and taught our whole public school that dance as well. So in addition to the one-time experience at the Eaton Center, it was replicated in a public school.
But if I'm reading between the lines here, too much, you let me know. But my sense is one of the reasons you did this is that you believe you got to bring arts to the people. You can't just expect the people to come to the arts. Fair?
Yeah, I think the real benefit of the arts beyond sort of the economic returns and so on that we talk about is active participation. And that is the creation of art. All of these studies we show about the personal development, the math scores, all of these things we look at in terms of public school education. It really is about the act of doing, creating art. And we also know that actually when people are engaged in that, they're also much more inclined to participate as consumers as well. The end point, I think, though, is more personal, is more about what role art plays in our individual lives. And the outpouring of that, or the indirect benefit to the sector, is that people actually participate in terms of donating money and buying tickets to our events.
Let's focus on the business case a bit here, because I gather one of the things that brought you to the attention of Mayor Ford and the people in his office was an article in Canadian Business Magazine where you outlined your ideas about how artists need to, I guess, rethink what it takes to be a successful artist in the 21st century. It's not just obviously sitting back waiting for government grants to come in and doing your thing accordingly. What was the nub of the argument you were making in that piece?
Well, I think ultimately revenues of all kinds are important. So government funding is important. At no point would I advocate, or would anyone in the arts community advocate, for less government resource. Sure. In fact, if anything, we have to reimagine it. Private sector and earned revenues are important as well. I think the nub of the argument is art is a sector that evolves. And we've had discussions in the past around the advent of radio and how radio was going to destroy art and TV was going to destroy and change art. We're living in a digital economy now where sort of the opportunity to create and consume art is changing as compared to what one could do 10 years ago. So we need to adapt to that. Certainly in terms of cultural diversification, there's tons of opportunity for us to reach into new communities, engage them in ways we haven't. A lot of our infrastructure is not set up to encourage and welcome a lot of those new Canadians, a lot of the ethnic communities that we see in Toronto that make the city so great. So there's significant growth opportunities if we start to imagine how we engage the non-consumer. And so the nub of the argument really was around that and around looking at how we might build new business models around engaging more and more people in what we do.
I can see why the mayor's office found that attractive, because so far the only argument I think I have ever heard from the arts community itself is we need government to give us more money. You use the word reimagine. We need to reimagine that relationship. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think the challenge with government funding is it's set up to serve what happens today, and often it was set up years ago to serve a particular infrastructure that was appropriate at that time. As the sector evolves, government funding needs to evolve, our business models do evolve, and our organizations do this all the time. We reimagine ourselves. And I think likewise our relationship to government, what government can invest in, where the strategic opportunities are for government investment in today's sector is really important. And that's a discussion that needs to take place.
So I presume, I infer from that you're saying anybody in the arts community who thinks that we're going to pressure government to give us more money these days, in the days of $55 billion deficits and $18 billion deficits, federally and provincially, it ain't on.
No, I think there's a huge openness, and particularly as we talk about moving into post-industrial economies and the importance of having a skilled and creative workforce. And there's a real role for the arts to play in helping ensure the economy of the future is supported with the right kind of skills and talents. And the arts community plays a significant role in that. And I think we need to have that discussion with governments. So it's not just we need more money, but we need more money for these reasons, and here's the role we're going to play in fixing our economy as we sort of come out of the recession.
The two biggest cities in the country like to compare their hockey teams and once upon a time their baseball teams and their population sizes and their business communities and arts as well. Michael, if you would, let's bring up this next graphic which indicates how Montreal and Toronto compare. And the numbers all suggest that if you look at public arts spending per capita, then the percentage who spend on the performing arts and the percentage who spend on museums, that first column suggests Montreal is doing a heck of a lot better than Toronto is. It's somewhat competitive thereafter, but that first column is quite instructive. Thanks to Maclean's magazine for those numbers. How do you read those numbers?
Well, there's no doubt that on a per capita basis we are trailing Montreal. This has been a discussion.
Not just trailing, I mean badly.
Yeah, well, and Vancouver as well is another city that's outperforming Toronto in terms of per capita spend. I think this is something that the city is interested in exploring. We have a creative capital initiative right now that is looking at these issues. Per capita measure is one measure and a valuable measure to look at how the city invests in arts. And I think we also need to look at things beyond that in terms of return, because one number that's not on that chart is the role the private sector has played in Toronto's arts community's growth, which has been significant. And I'm not saying that the private sector should subsidize municipal funding at all, but I think there are a number of different ways for us to look at the community, and certainly per capita funding is a key measure, and we do need to look at that, and I think the city will need to adjust its expectations to meet the changing competitive environment, not only in Canada, but as we try to draw the world's attention here. How do these numbers stack up with the sort of more global investment in arts and culture? In some countries, private sector investment's way higher. In some countries, obviously, government funding's way higher. And I think we need to look at those models and come up with what works best for Toronto and the Toronto of the future as we like to see it.
You used another phrase there. We have to adjust our expectations. What does that mean?
Well, I think that we look at these per capita numbers, and that's fantastic. It's a snapshot in time. It's actually a little bit out of date. Those numbers are from 2006 and based on the 2006 census information. So I think we need to update them. I think we need to create a dialogue with City Council about where we're going, and move art away from being a sort of year-by-year investment item to actually having a long-term strategic approach to arts investment and arts funding, and also be a little bit more clear as we increase the per capita funding what we're going to do with that money, because I think we have made the argument that we need more, and that's an excellent argument. We should continue to make it. We also need to show people what we're going to do with those dollars, and as the Ford administration talks about its respect for taxpayers, we know municipal funding, every dollar the government puts in, the private sector puts $5.80 in, and earned revenue generates $8.50. There's a huge return on that. So any incremental increase is going to produce a similar kind of compelling return within our economy.
I had a deja vu moment there. You said the Ford administration, and I immediately went back to Jerry Ford in the United States. You meant Rob Ford in Toronto. Those of us of a certain age, okay, think of Jerry. Can you draw a direct line between public spending on the arts and public participation in the arts or attendance of the arts?
I think you can. I think one of the key challenges facing the sector is figuring out how we engage or how we build platforms so that everyone can participate. And I think obviously the Toronto Public Libraries are a great example. 97 libraries where we do tons of cultural work and cultural outreach. Government invests in that. As a result, we reshape our society in compelling and exciting ways. Likewise, I think the investment in the arts community really is about engaging Torontonians in this artistic dialogue. And sometimes it's through arts education, sometimes it's through performance practice, access at museums, and so on. So there really is a direct connection between public investment and public engagement.
The Ford administration, as you put it, is in the process of putting a budget together right now. Does that budget adequately fund the arts in your view?
I think it's premature to talk about the 2012 budget just because they've just wrapped up the 2011 budget, and the Creative Capital Initiative, which is doing its work now and is reporting to Council in May, I think will play a really significant role in the evaluation of where arts fits in next year's budget. I think it's critical. I think what the city staff have done in coordinating a sector-wide consultation that's being spearheaded by Michael Thompson, the councillor responsible for economic development and culture, has been really exemplary in terms of reaching out into diverse corners, screen-based industries, museums, and so on. So I think there'll be a really exciting report back to council that will really equip council to look not at a few voices, but many hundreds of voices that come to the table.
You've got a bit of a relationship with the mayor of the city now. So my hunch is people are looking to you, particularly people in the arts community, who want to see the budgets go up, or at the best, not cut. They're looking to you to have received some kind of undertaking from the mayor that you're not going to get cut. Have you had that undertaking given to you?
Well, certainly for the 2011 budget, this was the discussion that he and I had when we first met after he became mayor, that I would participate contingent on the arts funding not being reduced. And I think the question now is how do we engage in that discussion about investment down the road and what that looks like. So yeah, certainly there's a role for me. I think ultimately my role is to almost translate between the arts community and the mayor's office. Because I'm an artist with an MBA, I tend to do that sort of translation fairly well and intuitively. And I think also creating an opportunity for everybody on council, not just the mayor's office, to experience arts and culture in a myriad of different ways. There's the performing arts scene, but there's incredible initiatives in terms of youth outreach and working with kids that are dropping out of schools and so on. So trying to equip councillors across the board, left and right, with an understanding of the role art plays, not only in terms of people consuming it, but also the sort of constructive social developmental role that art plays in our society. When
you spoke to the mayor, did you get a sense that he cares about the arts?
Yes, I did, yeah.
How did he indicate that to you?
Well, in our first meeting, he talked about sitting on the board of the Harbourfront Centre, which he did as a councillor, and I'd noticed actually when in the election campaign at a Toronto Dance Theatre performance that he was listed as a personal donor to the Toronto Dance Theatre. We got talking first about sports and his passion for football.
He definitely loves that.
He definitely loves it, and it's interesting because the way he talked about these kids and the volunteer work he does and the difference it's made in their lives is really actually quite powerful. And as somebody who grew up in Winnipeg playing sports as well, I can see that, I understand that, I relate to that. And we talked about how arts play a similar role in our society in terms of supporting all of those kids. So I think like anybody who interfaces with the arts sector, there are going to be certain areas that are of particular interest. And that was an area where we've sort of found some common ground in thinking about building a citywide platform to ensure that kids who want access to sport and arts programming would have it.
Well, his passion for football is well known, and he actually coached a team, and I think actually held out hopes of continuing to coach the team while he was the mayor, the high school team, but he clearly figured out he couldn't do that. My hunch is, he hasn't been, I don't say this with any degree of snobbery, it's just the way it is. I suspect he's not been to as many plays as he has football games, and I wonder if you see it as part of your job to get the mayor out to see some stuff.
Well, certainly. I think it's part of my job and part of everyone's job in the arts to get anybody who hasn't experienced us to see some stuff. So whether it's the mayor or not, the reality is for some people, the arts community is a tough one to enter. And we want to reach out to people and welcome them in. And whether it's the mayor or whether it's the average Torontonian, we want to welcome them in. And certainly, he's already had some experiences with a couple of youth outreach initiatives. He went to drop in on You for Change, which is this great project on Parliament helping kids in Regent Park in St. Jamestown. So yeah, that's certainly part of my job, is to introduce him to people. But the sector is so big and so incredibly diverse, and the exceptional projects that one could introduce a person to are so many, that it will be sort of a challenge to make sure that he meets the right people in the right order and so on, whether it's public arts or some of the urban-led arts initiatives, the performing arts organizations and so on.
Okay. Jeff, sit tight. We're going to invite some others to join us at the table and continue the conversation.